Welcome to the Che Talking Hour.
Guajira para el recuerdo. Aprendimos a quererte desde la histórica altura, donde el sol de tu bravura le puso cerco a la muerte. Aquí se quedará clara la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia.
Okay, Che Guevara is a very interesting person. He has a quote that says, "Revolution is about intense feelings of love," or something along those lines. I feel like that's true for Che's life. He was just running around looking for people to love him because he didn't get it from his family, and he just kept having kids, and they didn't give it to him either, apparently.
And he was born in Argentina, I don't know, the 50s, 40s, 30s, something around then. And so he was, well, in kind of like a middle class family, so he was fine, he was well-ish. And then he decided with him and his best friend, wanted to go on a motorcycle journey together all throughout South America because they were like doctors. He was a pharmacist, his friend was a pharmacist, he was studying to be a doctor, and then like 6 months before his last, or like a semester before he was actually a doctor, he decided to go on this motorcycle journey. And the motorcycle journey, we're on this like little bike motorcycle that like to break down a lot.
They were like, I'm gonna go chill throughout the country. It'll be super fun. We'll ride our motorcycle everywhere. Like, it'll work out perfectly. We don't have any money, but we'll just go with it. The whole time, truthfully, I don't know how they paid for gas, but I guess it was really cheap then. Their motorcycle broke down half the way, so they were walking. And so, yeah, but then, so they're like going through the country. Their motorcycle breaks, as I mentioned before. And they're like then walking through the entire continent, like hanging out with all the poor people who are also walking through the continent, like migrant workers, stuff like that. And so they're like, yeah, let's hang out with the migrant workers. This will be cool, because they weren't middle class like white guys, which they were, but they hung out with the indigenous like poor people, especially in the Andes.
This was a really kind of big moment in his life. It was the first time he had ever left Argentina, which is weird for us to think about, but anyway, it doesn't matter. And so he did this, and he met all like the poor people and the peasants and like all that sort of thing, and then he really connected with them, and he really liked them, and he decided that's what his life mission would be. He kind of wanted to go into, he was not just Argentinian, he was Latin American.
And so Che gets this whole big ideological enthusiasm, and then he starts reading Marx and Tolstoy and like everyone, and he embraces a lot of communist leanings, and he has this Pan-Americanism where he's like, we're all one people and we all should be like taking care of each other. We're just continuing the oppression that the Spanish started 500 years ago.
So then he went back to Argentina, finished up his doctorate degree, got his medical doctor certificate, and then went on a second motorcycle journey, but that one's not as famous because I guess he didn't write as cool a diary about it because he really liked to write, and a lot of people said he's a really good writer. And I guess that's true because we still read what he says.
So he meets Fidel in Mexico City in like 1957, 56, something like that. And they meet, and they're like total like birds of a feather. They become like the best bros ever. And Fidel is like, hey, I'm gonna take this boat trip soon with my other friends. We're gonna go hang out in my homeland of Cuba. And Che is like, dude, I'm totally up for a boat trip. Whenever I went on a motorcycle trip, it went great. So now I want to go on a boat trip. And so then they're like, yes! And so they get on this boat called the Grandma, named after someone's grandma. And so they go on, like, 80 people are on the boat. Only 10 of them survive.
Che loved it. He was like that was his game. He was like, yeah, love this, not showering, smoking cigars every day, even though it's terrible for his asthma, because he had like crippling asthma. You know, asthma attacks like all the time.
Like, it started out great, but it ended in like a 2-year revolution that overthrew Batista, who was an asshole, and like everyone was pretty happy about that. Even the United States government, they were pretty happy about it, because they were like, you know what, we're tired of dealing with Batista. He was an asshole. So then, Che's true communist leanings and also Fidel's kind of came out. The United States government became unhappy with them, but you know, the communist revolution in Cuba was strong, and Che's like out chopping down sugar cane on Sundays. Like, he works all week long. He's like the most dedicated guy ever. He works all week long. Then on his day off, he's like, I have a family of like 5 children, but you know what I'm gonna do? Cut down sugar cane. And so he does that. He has a long history of having a family but not hanging out with them. And so he does that for a while, but in the Algiers he gives a speech because he kind of travels around the world to a lot of the third world because he's very passionate. He's passionate about the poor people. So in the third world, he's talking about to a group of all these third world nations, and he makes some comments about the Soviet Union, which the Soviet Union has taken Cuba under its wing. And so the Soviet Union does not like some of the comments that he makes, and Fidel most likely gets a little bit upset about this, I would imagine, because him and Che meet for a few days, like in Fidel's office, and then, like a week later, he flies to Africa, which, if you like someone, you generally don't send them to the middle of Africa.
Potentially, maybe, arguably, Fidel sent him to the Congo. Because the Congo, like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or Zaire as it was known then, maybe not then, maybe before that, anyway, was under Belgian control. And then someone took it over, and then someone didn't like that, so they tried to fight them. So Che went to go help the people who were fighting them.
The people there weren't really into it. They didn't really support the leaders that Che was working with. He gave power to one of the Congolese men who didn't really know what he was doing, and they didn't have a really good army.
And that does not work out very well. It does not work nearly as well as it did in Cuba. In Cuba, it worked well. In the Congo,
which he probably lost because there's a lot of theories, but he just didn't really learn from his mistakes and that sort of thing.
he leaves and he hangs out in the Cuban embassy in the Czech Republic, and he's kind of just like, evaluating what went wrong. He writes his diary. Then he goes back to Cuba for a day, but while he was in the Congo, Fidel decided to read a letter from Che that says, I'm not a Cuban citizen anymore. Basically, like, giving all of Cuba, like, the big middle finger and, like, I'm heading out the door. And so, obviously, he can't go back to Cuba, like, as himself. So he goes back as, like, an old man. He's, like, this super old white dude, and he, like, pulls his hair out strand by strand. So he's bald, he wears glasses, he wears a suit. It's like, he does not look like himself.
And then he went to Bolivia, which was pretty epic failure because he died eventually. But I'll get to that in a little bit. But he went there and he was like, I'm gonna help the poor people or the peasants, and we're gonna have fun and we're gonna do stuff. And none of the peasants wanted to support them, and so the American troops and the Bolivian troops were like, we don't want you here, go away. So they tried hunting him down, and eventually they found him, they shot him in the leg, said, ha, we got you, kept him in his schoolroom. And depending on what story you're looking at, he either spent the whole night talking to a teacher of the schoolhouse or some petty officer who he almost coaxed into letting him go. And then on October 8th of 1967, he was captured on October 8th. On October 9th, he was shot and killed. And then they just decided to display his body for a really long time in a wash house. Never would I ever do my laundry again in that wash house if I had the choice. Nope.
The whole world since has worshipped him, as they should, because he was an awesome person. because he was El Che.
Guajira para el recuerdo. Aprendimos a quererte desde la histórica altura, donde el sol de tu bravura le puso cerco a la muerte.